Anyway, today's it's project management and design systems. It's a match. It's a very Tinder theme where it's like online dating. Swiping right means you're interested in the person. Swiping left means you're not. If both people swipe right, that means you're a match, and we'll see what happens after that. A little bit about myself. My name's Nam. My middle name's the last name's Ho. It's my parents named me that. It's an Asian thing. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now. I've always been a geek, playing with gadgets and toys and tinkering on computers and stuff like that, asking for the newest technology. Secondly, I played many roles in my tenure. I started off as a business analyst, gathering requirements, making sure the process works, making sure the requirements make sense, and then translating those into tickets. Then I have a degree in business. I always wanted to learn more about how does the money flow through projects and stuff like that. So project management, you got a budget, you got a timeline, and stuff like that. So that was the core of my growth in my career. And then my CTO always tells me I need to be a developer in order to be a better project manager, to understand the requirements. So I'm an aspiring developer. And I am currently now EVP of delivery at Basalt. It's a startup based out in Portland, Oregon. As a startup, you wear a lot of hats. So one day I'll be playing HR, another day I'll be playing the salesperson. And some notable badges while I've been in the industry. I've worked at Twitter as a program manager there. I basically owned their entire digital website system and made sure it was under Drupal. They were powering over 14 sites, so I did that for a while. Canvy Health Systems and Pegasus Systems, my company helped build their design system or help contribute to the design system. Canvia was our first design system we built from scratch, from soup to nuts, the new concept for them. And Workday, I helped with a D7 to a D8 migration. I was a program manager there. And those are not my kids, those are my nieces and nephews. So what is Basalt? This is the pitch deck. Everyone sees this is what Basalt is, but I like to give it a more. Basalt is a digital agency that focuses on building tools that scale the front end when it comes to web development. We believe that design systems and component-driven development empowers businesses to be their best selves. So we create a lot of APIs for brands using component libraries that power really, really cool user experiences across the web. So when I think of my company, I like to think of it as we found this new cool way to build the web. It utilizes component-driven development and design systems. It's really efficient, consistent, and has a lot of design reusability. So essentially, we build for the web better, faster, and with fewer resources. So when I started this company, I noticed that the process that we build sites was kind of broken. It was kind of like just sporadic. And I was seeking for a new process. So I reached out to some friends, and they told me to look at this new app called Dinder, right? And they said, I was seeking for a new process that, since technology is always rapidly changing, technology demands flexibility, adaptability, and creativity at every level. And like I said, the process is broken. With ever-changing technology, some things that go along with growth doesn't always follow the process. And I believe there's some sort of web renaissance right now. Think of responsive web design back in 10 years ago when you're building sites. No one really thought to switch it down. No one even knew what that was called. We just knew to zoom in on our phones to look at the site. Well, that was called responsive web design. That was a huge moment in technology for us. And my favorite thing is the last bullet point, closing the gap between designer and developers, right? As a project manager, you're kind of in the middle between development and design and stakeholders. You're talking to everybody. But then designers and developers don't really always work well together. They always work in silos. So the goal for me to find a new process was to bridge that gap between designers and developers. So, like I said, there's an app for that, of course. It's called Dinder. Let's just play around with it. We put the location here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The maximum distance is 50 miles, and we're looking for a new web technology that's about 2 to 20 years old, right? So we'll just let that fire off while we're talking about this. So what was digital projects like before? Well, it always started off with some stakeholder that had some sort of vision or an idea or a campaign. They wanted, let's say, 4 product releases. They're going to have 4 product releases this year, and they're going to have a marketing site for each of these product releases. So that idea, they came out of nowhere, and they bring the idea to the designer, right? The designer, they give the idea to the designer and ask, hey, I have this idea for this marketing campaign sites. I want it to have carousels. I want it to have videos. I want to have hero images and tons of modals. And most importantly, I want it to pop. And so designers are, okay, got it. I got the requirements. Let's do my design thing. They're designing it, making carousels, making it pop. And then it's pixel perfect PDF, right? And so what do they do after that? They take that and they kind of toss it over to development. And developers are like, oh, cool, a PDF file. And they're trying to interpret that. And sometimes they're not interpreting it correctly. Development team reviews the requirements, which consists of back-end and front-end developers, and they divvy up the work. And here comes the first blocker. The back-end team needs to set up the structure and foundational pieces first in order for the front-end team to get started. Once the back-end's set up, then the front-end can start coding, adding HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to make sure everything's popping, right? So that if you see that flow, it goes idea to design, design creates into this pixel perfect PDF, hands it over to the development team, and they kind of spread out and do their own things. There's another silo there. And so finally, the development team created their site, and they handed it back to the designers. And the designers are like, wait a minute, that looks off. Can you change this? So it has to go back to this iteration loop again. It's kind of a long process. And when finally the designers think it's okay, they bring it back to the stakeholder and like, wait, I wanted more carousels, not one carousel. And so that process takes a while, and it's a long iterative process. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking back in my old days at Twitter, like how was that process like? And I actually dug up some of the old mock-ups. This was for about.twitter.com. One of the beautiful designers created it pixel perfect, right? And even in mobile for us. I was like, cool, we have the mobile requirements now. But then, what do we do after that? We're thinking in pages. We're building it in pages. Like we're building this one page only. Nothing's really reusable. And I even found my notes. We took each of the sections and we asked what are the requirements for each of the sections there. Because that's how we got the requirements. So this is kind of messy. It's like a digital relay. You're waiting for each step to be completed in order to move on to the next step. You got to wait till the design's final, then you hand the design over to the development team. Backend has to start first, then front end, and then it goes back to the designers. It's just like a digital relay. Like the stakeholder wanted, they wanted multiple sites. So having multiple sites, it's hard to maintain. You're essentially recreating the wheel each time when you spin up a new site. So how do you maintain that consistency? And then there's technical debt. Shortcuts are always taken when there's a deadline. There's like, oh, I can patch this real quick. We can backlog this, and then we can hit it at post-launch, right? There's a lot of technical debt. And scalability. This process isn't as efficient and it isn't scalable because you're repeating yourself every single time. When a new comp comes in, you break it down, recreate it. Where's the reusability in that part, right? So doesn't that sound really frustrating? And I wanted to find something better. There has to be something better for this process. So let's go back to our app we had. It was Tinder. Let's get swiped. So we have the app going right now. It's trying to find some new technologies for me. And then the first one that pops up is Joomla. Like, what's Joomla? It's friends with IKEA, eBay. I don't really heard about that. And I feel like eBay is full of scams. So let's just go swipe left on that. Oh, then there's React. This is new. It's friends with Facebook. Lots of things, good things coming out of that. Let's see what's going on with that and swipe right. And then, Drupal 18 has tons of friends with Acquia, it's open source that contributes to the community. This looks really promising. Swipe right. WordPress, 0 friends, been in the game for 15 years and has no friends. I don't know if I would trust that kind of CMS, so no thank you on that. And then design systems, this is new. It's about 3 years old. Let's look more into this and see what it's like. So this is the profile of the design system. It's saying, I'm OCD, I love consistency, I scale well with other web technologies, and I live between development and design. What does that all mean? Well, let's swipe right and find out. Luckily, there's a match for that. This looks promising. I want to get to know more about design systems. Okay, so what is a design system? Well, it's still early on. Like I said, it's like a renaissance right now. We're trying to figure out what this really means. Very similar to Ethan Marcotte. He was the first person to kind of put responsive web design in his own terms and made it like an actual term. His focus was on fluid grids, media queries, and flexible images, and became the building blocks of responsive web design. It's still early. There's no industry consensus yet. Design systems do not have a broadly accepted definition. At Basalt, we're trying to create one. We're trying to be the Ethan Marcotte of this, so we'll see what happens there. But I can tell you what a design system is not. A design system is not a style guide on steroids. We hear this a lot. It's not. It is part of a design system, but this is not the sole purpose of a design system. Style guides is another subclass of design systems. This static documentation describes the design system itself, how the product should look, how it should feel, what's the use cases for the all UI patterns, what's the correct typography, what is the correct colors, and all that. Then you have your pattern library. Again, it's another subclass of design system. This is a set of design patterns for use across a company. It's your functional components and how do they use and when should we use it, when should you not use it. And then the last part, what a design system is not, it's not a deliverable. It's not one product that you finished and you launched and you just set it and forget it, you never touch it again. It's something that's always evolving. You're going to always want to contribute to it and use this tool with other products and newer technologies as well. So, like I said, we took a crack at the design system definition, and we say a design system is a set of interconnected patterns and shared practices coherently organized to achieve the purpose of digital products. So you got patterns, which are repeating elements that we combine to create an interface, buttons, text fields, icons, colors, typography, microcopy. And then there's practices, how we choose to capture and share these patterns and how it's used. And yeah. So the one key takeaway is that a design system is a single source of truth which groups all elements that allow the team to design, realize, and develop a product. So what else is involved in a design system? There's a lot with a design system. It's really, really broad, but I like to pare it down to 3 things so you guys can just take it away and all right, design systems, there's 3 things. There's your purpose, design principles, and shared values. And shared language. Why are we doing this? What are the guidelines? What is the design system? What's the purpose of it? Let's have a shared understanding of why we're building this design system, right? And let's have a shared language as well. Some people call a button. Some people call a button a CTA. Some people call it whatever. But we should have a shared language when we're building something together. And then another thing that's obviously involved in the design system is our patterns and components. We want to identify repeating patterns and group them into reusable components. And lastly, this is the hardest one, is governance strategy. Who is maintaining the design system? Who's owning it? Who's contributing to it? How flexible or how structured is the design system? Can you add as many patterns as you want? Or you can only have 10 you can use, right? And then design systems is a building block. Other things about design systems, it's when you have your design systems, there's 4 key things about the design system. It's a place to work. It's a single Git repo for multiple components to use. It just takes in dummy data that demos the variations of the components there. It's a place to learn about the components. It's great. It's a resource where you can go and what does this modal do? How do I know more about it? Well, that's a great place to learn how to use it. What's the structured data needed to use that component? A place to be inspired. There's recipes for solving common needs. If you're building a new site, it's pretty structured, so you can kind of play around with what components look like, and you can build it from there. So there's different recipes you can use, similar to templates, right? And a place to share. Hosting the site as public as possible. This is a new concept, and sharing your design system and showing it off and seeing how others use their design system, it creates creativity, and it shows that this is a powerful thing. Cool. Digital projects using design systems. So now, since we have a design system, we're going to use it with building a new site. So let's try this again. This process is a little different. Same thing, it always starts with some stakeholder that has some sort of crazy idea. And then it goes to the design, and it goes to, instead of going design straight to development, we work together now. We bring in the designers, the developers, front end, back end, the business analysts, and even the stakeholders to kind of work through these last 3 parts together. Review and component inventory. We work together to identify reusable pieces, and then those pieces there, I'll go into this in a second, creates tickets, build, style, implement, keeping it really simple. Front end and back end are off to the races in parallel. You don't have to wait for one to finish to get started on the other. And lastly, iterations, it's a tighter feedback loop. So let's go into, so we had a design you saw earlier, that Twitter mock-up there. Let's go ahead and do interface inventory, right? You're going to have the mock-up here, and the first thing you want to do is you want to identify all the repeating patterns. So I gathered all the buttons on this site over there. What are the cards? Cards are pretty simple. It has words or text and buttons, and it can be left to right. So it grabs all the cards there. Basic blocks is just your basic block with just text in there. And just doing interface inventory here can show you this is the beginning of how to build a design system. These are your components. These are the reusable patterns, the reusable things you're going to be seeing throughout your entire web properties. And honestly, this is your backlog of tickets. You got to build buttons, cards, basic blocks, global navigation, carousel, and hero. So one example we're going to do is a media block. I'm stealing this from our design system because it's easier to talk about. So you have a media block, you've identified it right over here. So what's in the media block? Just at a basic level. You have a title, you have some body text, you have a button color, and some sort of media, image or video, or whatever. And so these are the basic requirements in order to create a media block. And then that's great. So you identify the requirements, and now what's next? Well, you have to define the variations of it too, because if not all one size fits all, right? So you have to define the variations. So first one is right over here. This is our design system. So we identified what are the different colors that can be used on our site. So we have all our color palettes there, and then how can the media be aligned? It can be left, right, top, or bottom. So we identify all the variations there. And then lastly, what's the padding like on each of these? Is it 10 pixels, 40 pixels, 60 pixels? So we define what the different paddings are for the component here. And this is just a starting point of how you identify the variations. There's many other things you can do, such as where should we show the media? Like previously with the Twitter one, this didn't have the media over there, so you can hide that as well, right? So defining the variations there. Like I said before, those backlog of tickets, when you create the Jira, the backlog of tickets now, I keep it really simple. Keeping it build, style, and implement. Build tickets are more for a back end. They build the business logic, the functionality, how it should work. And then there's the style tickets, what it should look like. This is where the front-end developers work closely with the designers to define the variations, the padding, the colors, and features like that. And then when the back-end's built, so they can work in parallel now. You have the back-end and the front-end working together. And once they're in a good spot, there's just the implement ticket where you kind of glue the two things together. So when it comes to iteration, if there's a design change or functionality change and a layout change, you don't have to go through the entire loop again. You can just work within your team there to change the functionality. The backend doesn't have to wait till the front end to finish, or the front end can just work with the designers to, why does this look like? Why does this component look off, right? They're all working in parallel to perform tighter iteration loops, and we're able to change design, functionality, and layouts in parallel versus linear like before. So the great thing about all this is you're building your components into this toolbox. And you have these reusable components. And these components can be reused for other sites. So you're going to have your toolbox full of components now. So this is our design system where we have all these components we reuse throughout our entire site. So when we need to spin up a marketing site, we have these components we can use already, which is awesome. So how is this beneficial? Well, collaboratively, because you're no longer designing, sending it over to the fence, and having developers work on it. You're working together to define what are the repeating patterns. You're bringing designers and developers, and even the stakeholders together. It's maintainable because you spend less time and effort on basic brand management, visual regressions, and updates. You understand performance, where design efforts are leading to better outcomes or falling short, and it increases flexibility and responsiveness to customer needs. Consistency, like I said, you're building many of these sites, and by reinventing the wheel, something is not going to get caught, or something's not going to get captured correctly. So you're going to reduce design debt. You realize there's a brand, you promise brand safety now because these components are defined now, and you're just reusing that again. And then this increases the value of the customer experience. Lastly, scalability. You can focus on creation of new features and experiences and deliver additional brands or sites quickly and efficiently. And you can extend this across your channels, whether it's your native apps, your digital products, even print products as well, and your web. One thing that I thought of recently is because we went to have lunch at a client, and they gave us Chipotle, right? So if you think of your stakeholder as, hold on, let me take a step back. Okay, so you're about to get off work, right? And your family's hungry. And everybody in the family is like, I'm hungry, we want dinner. We want burritos for dinner. So that's your stakeholder. They're demanding something. These are the requirements, is burrito, or you want it ASAP. So what are you going to do? You get off work, you can either go to the grocery stores and buy your tortillas, your meat, your spices, and all that, or you just go to Chipotle, and it's like a component library right there. You walk in line, and you have your different variations of meat, your different variations of rice, tortillas, and then you can quickly deliver to your stakeholder by going to Chipotle versus building it from scratch. So every time you want burritos now, it's easier to go to Chipotle, or you just build it from scratch, depending on how much time you have, right? So that's one analogy I came across recently when I had Chipotle this week. Just like any project manager, there's always risk involved. And when we did the Cambia health systems design system, it was fresh to them. We had to teach them what it is and what the value of it is, and we built it for them, and they really liked it. But my CTO said, changing people and their process and their workflows is really, really hard. Changing code is easy. We built that thing and it was perfect, but having them use the design system and changing the workflow was really hard. So when it comes to change management, there are three stakeholders that affect the most, and we get a lot of pushback on, are designers, developers, and sponsors. So some people say designers are confined to their design system and they lose creativity. Well, design systems cover the mundane and the foundation of the user experience. So you save time building the known, and you can focus your imagination on creating new one-off experiences. And then developers, the one pushback for developers is they have to adapt to this new web development cycle, collaboration, working with others. Well, this is less back and forth, less time iterating, faster development, more time exploring and playing with new tools that you have. And then sponsors want to know, what's the ROI? Why do I want to invest into building a new tool? In design systems, the benefits can be drawn throughout the organization. If the investment is to be seen to benefit all, not just the technical team, the lift is much less to bear. In addition, the organization may have the opportunity to consolidate tools, which saves time, which saves money, and knowledge transfer requirements. Cool. Out of scope, design thinking. So, think outside the box. It's great to think about design systems in our industry with web development and stuff like that, but design systems are everywhere. The key thing, very similar to recycle, is reduce, reuse, recycle. Reducing, find ways to simplify the process and get rid of the things that didn't work. So when we're consulting with other clients and they have this huge inventory of components, and I'm like, all right, guys, there's a lot of repeating things here. Let's kind of reduce. I'll bring up the carrots. I'm like, does this bring you joy? And they'll say yes or no. And then we can either get rid of it or not. Reuse. Find processes that work great for you. Find other areas where you can apply the same strategy. Kind of advocate this and be an evangelist for this type of concept. And then recycle. See how the process can be improved. Find the weak link. Adjust. Try again. Call it the QA of web development. Test, adjust, and find this design systems a way to get it better. Ideas change and refine like every relationship, but be ready to continue iterating, evolving, and ready to grow. So you're wondering how my relationship with the design system is. Well, it's been 2 years now. Our 2-year anniversary was yesterday. We created this new tool called Knapsack, and it's basically a new way to, it's a tool to help build your design system for designers and developers. So check it out. Yeah, that's all I got for the small group. Any questions or anything? I know I went really fast. Yeah.
How do you ensure the communication between different groups like designers and developers? Even developers break down to front end and back end. Mm-hmm. And then every team has their expertise, and then they think they are communicating to other teams, but it's not necessarily
the right.
Well, it is understood by in a way they intended.
Gotcha.
Like, there could be some gaps
Yeah,
sometimes.
so is it because the team is kind of separate and siloed in a way? Because for me as a project manager, I always want to have a cohesive team where everyone's talking to each other and collaborating. And when there's a decision point made, I have something called a decision log, and I capture it and make sure everyone signs off on that. So the requirements are always clear in the beginning before anyone gets started there. Does that help answer?
Yeah, so you always just keep them together.
Yeah,
then
and
just
I
every
play,
step
you're the
they-
middleman as a project manager, middle person, right? You're hearing one side from the other, one thing from the other person. You talk to each other. They don't really talk to each other much, but you're the person that kind of is the liaison between the two. So what I typically say is like, what I'm hearing from the designer is this, and this. Is this right? And I relay that to the front-end developers or the development team. And they both say, if it both checks out, then it goes into the decision log. This is what we both agreed on. If the decision is not right, let's meet again and talk about it. So there's a lot about communication and transparency as well. Yeah?
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, full disclosure, I'm not sold yet.
Okay,
But,
it's fine.
I think, so you had started out by talking about responsive design, how we're at a similar moment in terms of
Yep.
a renaissance.
Yep.
And it seems that responsive design was a very clear response.
To how the user experience of like their phones and stuff, right?
Yeah, technology.
Mhm.
I mean, we had no choice, right? Design systems feel like they're more in service of studio profit, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you mean by studio profit? Just out of
Well,
curiosity.
Well, if you can do this and you can really achieve this question of reusability and efficiency and
Mhm.
consistency, then we're achieving higher profit margin on our
Yeah.
projects, right?
Yeah.
It's not.
Typically, yeah.
I mean, that seems to be what's driving this. But is that a fair statement to say?
I mean, it is one of the value adds. It also helps with the user experience as well, because when you're spinning up new sites and reinventing the wheel, sometimes it could be like a fragmented experience. Whereas if you use a design system that has clear components of how to use it, the experience from, say, like the About Me page is going to be different from the community page. There's going to be two different sites, right? The product homepage is going to be different from like the community page. However, the experience of using the nav widget or how the modal reacts and stuff like that, it's the same component powering the product homepage and the community site. So that experience for the user is still, it's not broken. They understand that. That's another value point besides the studio.
And how is that different than just really good UI UX?
Well, if good UI UX is done correctly at the component level,
Yeah.
then you don't have to recreate new UI UX for another site that's done. You can
Oh,
create
that's
different.
fair.
You can create different variations of it,
Yeah.
right? But it all comes down to the component level and the design system level.
Mhm.
Whereas like you're building that media block for the product site, but you know that's going to be used across other properties.
Mhm.
Define the variations of it versus like, all right, we have a new product launching, let's recreate this again, and then like, how's that tile or how's that media card used again?
So that's assistance. Can't talk.
That's right.
That's an example of multiple deliverables for the same client. So I can
Mhm.
see how that would be super helpful. Do you find that this approach works best for a certain size team? At what point does this system become too much if the team is not a certain size?
It's a great question. So we've built it currently we have a client in New York that has 37 web properties, right?
Right.
Now that's massive. And then there's other clients that have 5 web properties. It depends on your governance model, like who's the owner of the design system, how structured is it, or how flexible is it?
Mhm.
Like for the big 30+ web properties,
It's crucial.
they're very, they have a digital or a branding team that has input on what the color looks like. It has to be exactly how it is across all the brands, and every component has a variation for each of the web properties, but it's the same component they use,
Mhm.
just different colors or fonts or stuff like that. So it depends on your governance model and how much you want to contribute to it or how flexible it can be too. So, but when it comes to just simple web development, this way to me is just much faster. You don't have roadblocks waiting for a backend to be done, and you can work with your designers and understand what is the requirement for this page you built. Sure, but these are the components that I see across this entire site. why not think about it at the component level and build the components together? Like, add the padding, what size padding is it, what fonts go in here, and what the buttons should look, rounded corners or rectangular corners and stuff like that. And if there is a design change, just from using the buttons as an example, we started off with just a square, or a rectangle, sorry. They wanted rounded corners. Back in the day, you had to change that button all across, where you, in the design system, you just change the rounded corners once, and it powers through all the buttons over there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. Anyone else?
Okay, sorry.
No, you're great. I love this.
So that's the client size. What about your internal team size? You've worked largely at larger firms. So what size studio does this become? Over infrastructure versus this is actually going to be super helpful. I think I'm hearing you say from an iteration standpoint, it's helpful regardless
Yep.
of any of these variables.
Gotcha.
But if your developers and your designers and your content strategy people are already pretty tightly integrated and working well together, is this still something you would recommend at a small team size?
It depends how fast you want to move and how big you want to build the design system too, but I've seen companies have a very small core team of just maybe 2 developers, a designer, a content strategist, a QA person, and a project manager, and they can power the entire thing. Or you can have a really big design system, have many designers design tons of components, and then lots of developers to build into that design system. So it really depends. And I know you hate that answer.
No, it's a fair answer.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm from like a user design system. We actually work with results as well. And we're a very large corporation, but what he's saying, we have so many different web properties that very web properties, but with design system, it keeps it cohesive and the look, feel, the branding, and not only it expedites the lookability. So being able to reuse all of the components, having flexibilities and the variations being offered within the design system, and also utilize our UX team as well with the design, but maintaining
The core components,
Yeah.
just mainly to the design system team. Like, they have their own core design system. I'm speaking for myself. They have their own core design system team, which is 60 you guys, but that powers a lot of their web properties. Like, I was just catching up with her, and she was like, yeah, our community site uses your design system that you guys helped build. I'm like, what, really? I mean, how did it work? Like, we just use the components there, and we just define different variations, and it's powering it, and it's working. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. I didn't realize that. And now, that's just talking about the web level, and now there's the product level too, like native apps and stuff like that. The design system is, if you have an open API, it can power all your digital properties if you really want it, even your print stuff too. Yeah.
So I admittedly came in a little bit late to this, but I've been picking up threads of this, this conversation and this idea over the course of the past few days, and I'm still trying to understand, are you building a design system for a particular client? Or are you building it for an industry? Are you building it for, sort of your firm's approach to, how much of this is recyclable? Say you build one higher ed site, and then you get another higher ed client who wants a lot of the same things. Are you leveraging, is the goal to, or is the opportunity not just to leverage your design system, for that first higher ed client on behalf of that higher ed client through multiple properties of theirs, but then be able to leverage some of that stuff on other projects for different clients?
Totally, 100%. So it's a great question. So what we did was we built, you always start with one client first, and you build it from scratch, right? We built it from scratch for them, built a design system, and we built a design system methodology of like, how do we even get this thing started? And it all goes back to there's many workshops we do. First, like, what's the goal? What's the shared principles and purpose of doing this? And then now breaking down components together and just working together with the client on building out their design system. And then when we first had our first client building out the design system, we didn't have a tool to use. So we created the tool Knapsack, which you saw earlier. And that tool enabled designers to create things in Sketch and then get those components that they built in Sketch into Knapsack, which is our tool. And then the developers can develop the components. I'm not really technical. They develop the components and all the technical code in Knapsack as well. So that framework right there, Knapsack, is reusable across different clients. And we use that same tool
across different clients to get them started. We start off with first, like, why are we doing this? Why are we here? Kind of having like a powwow moment. And then, all right, what are the repeating patterns? Let's identify it. We define the patterns together. And then we choose one component, we build it together. We build a component in Sketch, and it goes into the design system, and then it powers through Drupal or something else, just to see that proof of concept work. And then from there, they have a backlog of tickets already, or backlog of components already, they just build into the design system there. And then from there, the design system grows and it maintains, and it just starts from there. So we do that for different clients there. Does that help answer your question?
No, it really does. I think so. We're coworkers, and we're gonna talk about this over beers in a little while. But
Happy to talk too.
I think what we've been experiencing is, because we do a lot of repeat work for clients in certain industries, is that we've kind of been doing some of this already. Like, your sort of staff listing page with the headshots and the button. Like, we're at a certain point, it is what it is, and we're not going to there's no point in redoing it because it's not the sexiest part of the site. So we're kind of just, that is what the staff page is, and then we'll pour some creative juices into doing something truly unique where it counts.
And that's one of the things about designers, where some people say like, oh, how many design systems to put it, deteriorates the creativity of designers. Well, you can quickly do the staff page or now you can focus on your creative juice on something else, right? So if you had your design system, a client always wants their About Us page or their staff page, you have components already that are just placeholders, and you throw them in there, and then the CMS can just add content to it, and it looks very similar.
So my question then is, looking at this from a designer's perspective, notwithstanding that structurally a staff page may look different, we may try and differentiate it visually in certain ways. And so when it comes to the theming of these components, how far, what can you push? What can you differentiate or customize? And where are the breaking points? Is it geography? Like, what aspects of the component are flexible when it comes to theming?
So I think everything starts off. I'm going to show you since it's small groups, it's easier to show you guys something. I hope this works. People say don't do live demos, but let's see. Let me just mirror it so it's easier. So for our client here, come on. What they did, so you asked about the different creative stuff on there. So at the very, very, very molecular level, the atom level, you have typography, colors, pattern, that. You define that in design tokens, and those design tokens will power the rest of the components there. So that's one way to kind of just cover the bases when it comes to different creative stuff there. But then having components and their variations, that's where you can have different types of ways to display your content or display the experience there. And then when it comes to layouts, you define another component called layouts. Like, what does a full width layout look like? What does a 2-up look like? Or stuff like that. So you're defining these sets of components already. And so when it comes down to time to build, you just build it up on there. Does that make sense? Yeah. Here we go.
But I think that in order to have that flexibility, maybe you don't start out with that full range of flexibility, but to have that flexibility, you're those variants get built and incorporated into the system at some point.
Yeah.
And then it's there for future reuse. But maybe you don't build every variant in your.
No, you build it. You very low fidelity at first.
It sounds like it's probably pretty iterative, and you're
very
adding
iterative
to it over time.
So if you look at this site here, this is their accordion, right? And it expands. You can add stuff like that, but then they have different color schemas. So this is for their main site. This is for their kid site. This is their health patient site. And then you can see how, the health patient is different. I think the kids one is the one that has different. It has different font and functionality too. But that's pulling from design tokens. But when we first built it, it was just this one component, and they added different variations to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Making clear? Cool. Anyone else?
I could give an example of how we went from 0 to a design system methodology. For us, it's more about the methodology of it, because prior to that, in the beginning, there was nothing.
It was Wild Wild West.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm from Harvard Library, which is affiliated with the university, but if you know anything about the university, it's extremely decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot decide on the color of crimson.
Right.
That's still arranging.
Yeah.
PMS 342.
Well, so with the library, there are like at least a dozen different discovery systems, as we call them, which are essentially just ways into the collections, whether they're digital or physical or whatever. And it grew over the decades that there have been like systems to power like the catalogs and all that stuff. So when it came time to redesign the website a couple of years ago, we saw that as an opportunity to introduce some sort of cohesion, some methodology to how
Component-driven development or something like that. Yeah.
right, to why we are making things look a certain way. And the why was really the Trojan horse to structure design based on like evidence based. Like we were able to do testing, we were able to understand what works, what doesn't, and that is sort of fueling a design pattern, so to say, behind what goes down to the very bottom of like a button or a Twitter icon, all the way up to the page layout for either the homepage or the staff directory, a staff profile page, things like that. So all those pieces, so we went sort of the standard route with a Drupal website and Pattern Lab to do the integration with Twig, the theming engine behind Drupal. So that all is pretty par for the course of contemporary site engineering. But our challenge is what happens next, which is we have all of these other systems that are either legacy, homegrown, platforms that we have no hand in engineering ourselves, just things that are off the beaten path. And the idea is that we are building out the design system where we are able to declare if you have an accordion element.
The accordion must be like this. So you have a very strict design system.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to be able to use this. And so at the very least, what it's cranking out is HTML,
CSS, and JavaScript.
And whatever the environment is, ideally it would be something a little more contemporary, but even if it was something like Bootstrap, that's powering an existing framework for like an off-the-shelf web application that's really useful, like let's say for viewing digital images. We want that to look and feel like it's a part of the library ecosystem.
Part of the experience. Yeah.
We can take that and take the patterns that we've developed. It's like, okay, so whether it's in-house or whether it's with a vendor, we can explain to them it needs to look and act like this. It becomes a very useful set of rules, and
it's a source of truth, if anything. You gotta
Exactly.
you go straight to the design system. Like, what does the button look like? What does this look like? It tells you, it's documented in there, and it cannot vary from this at all. So
exactly. So for us, it has less to do with the technology, but more about
the philosophy. And
explaining how and why something is the way that it is.
What's the intent of it? What's the purpose of this?
And over time, the look and the feel of all that's going to evolve. It's going to change. We're not going to be so into like sans serif fonts. Like later on, maybe black letter will be the latest and greatest thing, and it'll be easy to implement those changes in a universal way because we've got that starting point, that foundation, the building block of a design system to let it all sort of like propagate out. How effectively we'll be able to do that is going to be determined by
technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just how rigid the systems we have to move this onto will be. But that's that chapter is still to be written.
You can talk to us about that. Help you with that. Yeah.
So it's interesting. You're doing this all in-house, or are you working with an outside firm?
So we started with a vendor, but the idea was to do it hand in hand. We learned from them so that we could be an in-house agency, so to
For
say.
yourself.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
what we did too. We basically give you the Lego building blocks,
Yeah.
and we teach you how to do it. And then from there, you guys can go build your components. We don't need to do that. We did the hard part already, which is like starting the design system, starting that philosophy, getting your team together and working together, and communicating together. And then once you're ready, we'll take the training wheels off, and you guys can run with it. If you need more resources, then we can jump in and help.
Exactly.
But
But
getting started is always the hardest part. Yeah.
Yeah, we were able to take everything that they did. We studied how they did it. They explained to us how they did it. It was part of the contract. And said, all right, by the time that this project is done, we will, with a reasonable amount of being new to this, be able to do everything that you did for us on our own, for our our clients, our departments, our different collections and museums and archives and stuff like that.
Right.
They can come to us, or we can go to them with the credentials of like saying, we're here to update and improve the experience for the users for your web properties. And so, so far it's working pretty well.
How old is your system?
A couple of years old, I would say. I mean,
wow.
Drupal 8.
Oh, okay. So at least 4, 5.
Yeah, it was last July that we came out with the first release. So going back about a year, not even. I would say October.
And is it public facing? Like, do you share that with others?
The Pattern Lab instance?
Sure. Yeah, or your commit library or pattern library.
I think it is, but this is part of what we're also working on. Is it's still sitting on the vendor's GitHub account, and what we're
they got you there. I'm just kidding.
No, they're more than happy.
Yeah.
It's a repo that
Yeah,
we can
you can control.
and
Yep, totally.
put somewhere else. What we're running into is the university bureaucracy, which is that we want to work with the central IT organization for the university to host it through the university's GitHub account.
You want to, or you have to?
We want to. We want to play
So
ball.
you can own it. You can own it all.
Yeah, we want to be cool about this, but they're not making it cool. The one of the requirements for Pattern Lab to live out on its own is that if you have this in a repository, is that you have the GitHub Pages component activated as a